In the 1970s, one of the leaders of the Waldorf movement, Karl Ege, wrote in his essay, An Evident Need of Our Times, "What we are founding here is a seed, the seed of a living organism. The organism is essentially threefold: pedagogical, artistic, and agricultural, as reflections of thought, feeling, and will. Each needs the others if the whole is to flourish. All are interrelated. For young and old alike, this work together will create a place in which to become, in the true sense, a full human being." Babies, today I'm speaking with Martin Ping of Hawthorne Valley Farm and Hawthorne Valley Association, which is, to call it a farm or an association or anything, could never really appreciate everything that it is. Martin has been at Hawthorne Valley for more than 30 years. He formerly taught practical arts in the high school. He still does teach in the high school. He has served as director of facilities for 14 years and managed several multi-million-dollar construction projects while he's been there. Since 2003, Martin has served as the executive director, balancing his time developing the synergies amongst the association's diverse enterprises with cultivating collaborative relationships between Hawthorne Valley and other associations in the Upper Hudson and Berkshire region, as well as mission-aligned initiatives nationally and globally. Martin teaches grade 12 economics now and guest teaches during the high school J term. In 2018, Martin co-founded the Place Corps, a Hudson Valley-based educational institute designed to support the next generation in creating innovative solutions to build sustainable, joyful livelihoods for all. He is co-founder and storyteller for The Magic Puppet Tree, a founding member of Slow Money Alliance, and has also served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations. Martin is also just a magical human being, and I feel so blessed to have met him and gotten to speak with him now several times. You will appreciate what a treasure he is just listening to him. He's one of those people that you feel immediate kinship with, and I can't tell you how much I recommend just browsing the website of the Hawthorne Valley Association, because you can then begin to appreciate how they have managed to really honor that vision of wholes nested in other wholes and the interconnection and interrelated nature of all of the work that needs to be brought within one organism for everything to flourish. It all sounds like a bunch of hyperbole when I say it, but I think we'll just get right into the interview so that you can see that it's really true. Without further delay, here are a few words from Jesse about our sponsors, and then we'll get into my interview with Martin.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crops, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and much more, all powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. We have been using a BCS tractor on our farm since 2014, and it has saved the day and leveled the workload more times than I can count. And I find new ways to employ it every single season. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. All right, enjoy the show.
Martin Ping, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for making time for me today. I'm excited to talk to you.
It is so nice to see you on the other side of the screen here, and I'm looking forward to a conversation.
Awesome. Well, Martin, there's so much to what you do and Hawthorne Valley Association, and we'll get into that. But first, I would love it if you would share with the listeners a little bit about you and your history and kind of how you came to be where you are now, and then we'll get into what that is.
It's a great question. I love biography work. It's so much fun to learn other people's stories and even to reflect on one's own. And if I now look backwards with the benefit of having some time to reflect on these things, and I think about what were the core elements of my younger life that became foundational to, or one could say like through lines in my biographical journey. And if I look back, I could think of three threads that braid together and really make sense to me now. And the first is a love for and a reverence for nature. I grew up across the street from the ocean in a small town in New Jersey, and it's pretty hard not to cultivate or develop a deep sense of reverence for nature when you're standing on the edge of a continent, looking out at the ocean and seeing the night sky and experiencing storms and actually having that sense of in-betweenness where you're standing on the edge of 3,000 miles of ocean on one side and 3,000 miles of continent on the other side. It puts one in one's place as far as feeling both small in one sense, but also very much interconnected into these very deep, vast mysteries that we participate in. So that was one. And then because I grew up one of 9 children in a small town where all of my friends' families were also 7, 8, 9, 10, in one case, 15 children, I developed an appreciation for community. And I was 9 years old, and I had a very conscious experience where I thought, well, this is really a fortunate way to grow up, where all the parents are looking after the children, and you feel safe, you feel seen, you feel celebrated. And I thought, if I'm ever in a situation where I'm raising a family, I want to do it in community. This just makes sense to me. And as I got older and became aware of my own limitations, I realized it's actually essential for me anyway, to raise children in the context of community. So that was thread number 2. And the final one centers around food. When I was 15, I decided to become vegetarian. And I told my mom, and she said, well, that's nice. You'll have to cook your own food because I have to cook for your 4 brothers, 4 sisters, and your father. And I said, no, that's the whole point. I have this curiosity now about food, and it really led right away to the whole concept of organic and clean food and fair food and equitable food. And it really set me on a life's journey, which at the time was required some will and effort to get on my bicycle and drive around the Jersey Shore and look for the types of things I wanted to eat. But I started cooking my own food. I still remember my first cookbook and the first recipe I made out of that cookbook, vegetarian epicure and lentil tomato soup. I had no idea what a lentil was. Yeah, I really learned a lot. I started baking my own bread, whole grain bread. I started making my own tofu, my own yogurt. And my mom became very curious and started to share what I was making. And eventually my siblings also became very curious. And I'm not going to take credit for it because I think they all came to it in their own way. But I have 2 siblings who are vegan. I think 3 are vegetarian, 3 more. So my mom now is a CSA member and eats primarily organic. It's as much as the nation's food awareness has developed, my family is no exception. And so I'm grateful for that. If I put reverence for nature, a love for community, and a curiosity about food together, well, it kind of makes sense that my footsteps would lead me to Hawthorne Valley, and I would get to work on all of those themes now for the last 30, 35, almost 40 years that I've been here. So that's it. And we came, my wife and I came to Hawthorne Valley in 1984. We were looking for a physician who would help us have our second child at home for home births. And we heard about a Dr. Philip Nkeo in a place called Harlemville, New York. And that brought us over here in the spring of 1984, and we've never looked back. And we've raised our 2 children here. They both went all the way through Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School, and now my 3 grandchildren are at Hawthorne Valley, and 2 of whom live next door to me and have been going to school, the 9th grader for 12 years, and I've made her breakfast and walked her to school every day, pretty much for that whole 12 years, same as I did for her mom, down the same cow path, and her little brother now, who's in pre-K. And our West Coast grandson moved out here this year and is living with us and going to 10th grade at Hawthorne Valley. So I couldn't be happier to have all 3 of our grandchildren at Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School.
So such a beautiful story. Do you remember what it was that sparked your decision to become a vegetarian at that age? I mean, it's common, for people to, maybe it comes from a love of animals or a bonding to animals and guilt about that. But do you remember what it was for you that made you want to be vegetarian at that age?
It's funny. I don't have one epiphany moment that I can point back to. I definitely read Sinclair Lewis' The Jungle at that time, and that had some alarming elements to it for me, for sure. In some ways, I feel like it was the future reaching out to me and just saying, this is going to be your path, and it's going to make sense. And for a long time, it did, and still does. However, I have to say that being involved with biodynamic agriculture and seeing the role of the animal in its place within the farm organism has modified my stance somewhat, and I'm not 100% vegetarian anymore. I don't eat a lot of red meat, but on occasion, if I am at somebody's house and they've prepared something very nicely and we know the source of where the food is coming from, then I'm very grateful, and I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm also, having grown up across the street from the ocean and being a lifelong lover of fish, I still like to have fish once in a while too, and try to limit that. Like, I was in Providence, Rhode Island for a slow money gathering over the weekend, this past week, and I met a gentleman there who had a company called Fearless Fish, and he was doing all line caught fishing with this ikejime technique, the Japanese technique for processing the fish once they were caught, and it was just so cool. And he was such a cool guy. We spoke on a panel together, actually, that after the conference was over, I found my way to Fearless Fish Market and bought some local ikejime processed black bass and bluefish, and brought that home for a very lovely treat, fresh dinner that night. So yeah, I'm not a vegetarian anymore, and I had been a vegan for a little while at one point in that whole journey, but that didn't last for too long. I'm too big a fan of cheese, and
yeah. I find in this way of living, in this life that we share, that the journey of ethical eating looks different for everybody, and the landing point can be different. But we often, vegetarianism is a common starting point, and it tends to evolve from there. And it's always really interesting to hear people's relationship with food evolve through the lens of ethics and things like that. So thank you for sharing yours. And let's start with the farm. Was that your ingress point to Hawthorne Valley? And what's your relationship to the farm? And I was reading a lovely piece this morning about you, and I believe one quote from you was the best way to understand Hawthorne Valley is by walking its paths, which I think is a beautiful sentiment. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of setting the scene and describing the farm or the location, and then we'll get into all of the other facets of this thing that you're a part of and pivotal to.
Well, the farm is the ground on which all of our work depends, and it's sort of obviously both metaphorically and physically. I did kind of wander into the valley as a young parent, and I would say the school was very much more the entry point, and my career here started as a high school teacher and the steward of the campus with students. So I did that for 14 years prior to becoming the CEO in 2003. But the farm is the place where, again, to be so blessed to be able to walk the land and connect to the natural world daily, the way that I get to do, is something that is so nourishing and enriches my life in ways that are hard to really find words for, and certainly hard to feel like I deserve or will ever be able to pay back. It's a tremendous blessing, and certainly this came into sharp relief during the COVID period, because I was thinking of people who were maybe holed up in apartments in New York City or something, and I don't know how I would have ever survived and remained whatever sanity I have, which is debatable, but I would have lost that. And just to be able to go out for a walk and experience the farm and both the farm animals and the cows, which I've always found very instructive in their stillness and in their tendency to ruminate and contemplate, has been for me instructive. And also the rest of the farm organisms that are living here, that are not the domesticated ones, but are equal participants in this great dynamic ecosystem and landscape that we're participating in and in many ways responsible for stewarding. So, that's I'm not a farmer. I often get introduced as a farmer when I'm speaking, and I always have to make that correction, because I think farmers are Renaissance people and are actually quite smarter than I'll ever be, and they need to know so much and be able to do so much all the time, and every year under increasingly more challenging circumstances. So what has always been a difficult vocation is only getting more so with the advent of climate chaos and the drought that we're experiencing right now, which could change with an atmospheric river overnight. And my heart goes out to all people who are feeding us and who are trying to make a living doing so, because it's never been easy, and it's not getting easier. And I feel so privileged that I get to support farmers in my work and try to help them find the resources they need to be able to do that in a way that provides them with a decent or more than decent living and lifestyle. And I feel the same way about teachers. Farmers and teachers are my heroes, and so I get to play a supportive role in my role as ED and CEO. I like to call it executive servant as my title, because it's really what I feel more I'm doing is just everyone else here is doing the work, and I'm just happy to play a supportive role.
That's a very humble categorization of what you do, but it's beautiful segue as well, because I think one of the key reasons for wanting to share Hawthorne Valley Association with our listeners is that it's a very unique system of supporting those roles that you just pointed to that are very challenging, have always been very challenging, but are especially challenging now. And another thing that I read this morning that you said was how there's a really sort of unique quality to dreams coming true. And so you have to be careful what you're dreaming because they actually do come true. And it does, I think, point to the uniqueness of Hawthorne Valley Association, because when I'm reading about it and when I was doing research about it, I found one of the things that comes through so clearly is how adaptive it is and has been, and how iterative it seems to put things together in support of community and learning and connection to nature, and how any one of those things, whether it be farming or teaching or access to food, access to art, those things can exist independently, but they often don't thrive when they're not connected to one another. I'm not saying this in a very articulate way, so I'd love to hand it to you and just let you talk about the association and everything that it entails, because the farm is just sort of I don't mean just, it's the anchor, but then there's the school, which is an equal anchor, but is related, and it's a way of maintaining a web. And it's very complex, but it's also so pure and simple. And it's, I think, conception. So Martin, tell us about how it works. Yeah.
You're striking such a chord for me, and it's really such a great question. And I want to say, from your lips to God's ears, as they say, for your seeing something in what we're striving to do that is maybe not always recognizable to everybody, but you're really speaking in a way that resonates so deeply for me on what I see Hawthorne Valley is striving for. And you use the word complexity, and we are, from my perspective, actively seeking more complexity all the time, because I feel nature needs to be the pattern from which we're learning. Nature has 3.8 billion years of experience, and it's based on complexity. And the more complex, the more life it's capable of creating and sustaining. And so why not start there and try and have an ecosystem approach to our work that is not based on the kind of specialization and monolithic or monocropping, industrial model of everything nicely fitting into a box and being neatly engineered row by row, what have you. And I'm not trying to say that by comparison all that is wrong and Hawthorne Valley is right, but I'm going to trust nature as my guide, because nature does have the wisdom and the experience to warrant that. And so I teach grade 12 economics, and that's one of my classes I still teach and love it so much. And one of the things I say to the students is, if you want to see an example of a good economy that's actually working, let's go for a walk in the forest. And there you have it. And just observe. You don't have to intellectualize anything. They can just really start to see and figure it out. These are a web of relationships that are making it possible for the entire forest to thrive. And occasionally some things die off, but then that becomes nutrients for something else to flourish. And this is, again, highly instructive for the human mindset, which is ultimately becomes, sometimes too clever for its own good and gets it too hubristic and forgets the humus underneath our feet, which is actually can be inspirational for how we can conduct ourselves and how we can design human systems to work in a way that is has some more adaptability, a word that you use that I really love, has some more redundancy kind of built into it in a way that's like makes sense and isn't clunky. And I have, in my time as CEO, I've added and helped add quite a bit to the Hawthorne Valley ecosystem and universe as far as in different initiatives, and also helped incubate quite a number of initiatives that maybe lived here for a while or that we fiscally sponsored that are now out and about in the wider community and are also part of a growing ecosystem of practitioners. And I remember prior to COVID having what was a kind of occasional recurring conversation with with various board members who would say, "Oh, this Center Valley is so confusing. How do I? There's just so much going on all the time. How do I speak to a potential donor or somebody who's interested in Hawthorne Valley and and why can't we just do like one thing like other not-for-profits? And why is it so complex?" And I say, because complexity is our friend, and we're seeking it. And they say, "Yeah, but what's my elevator pitch?" And I had to quote my good friend Wes Jackson from the Land Institute, who has said many wise things to me, but I think my favorite Wesism came at this point. He said, "Martin, when people ask me for my elevator pitch, I tell them, let's take the stairs." And I thought, that's right on. That's exactly what we need, is like slow it down and stop thinking that everything will fit into a nice soundbite. And somehow we need to tailor our lives to that reality, when in fact, complexity is so much more our friend. And learning to be adaptive rather than strategic plans that are all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, that you think you'll know everything you're going to do. You actually plan in such a way that you're have an imagination for where you're going, and you have vision and even pathways or direction of travel to get there, but that you're actually also building in much more capacity for adaptability and responsiveness to the things that are happening. And in this day and age, it's the things change on a dime. And COVID was a great example. And it was actually our complexity that saved Hawthorne Valley during COVID, because we were able to shift positions around from residential programs that shut down overnight. And all the people that were involved in the residential programming would have been, we would have had to lay them all off. We lost several $100,000 worth of revenue. But then our retail grocery store was going gangbusters, and we needed more help there, so we could temporarily move people there. The school needed to move outside to be able to have on-site education. We did it all outdoors under tents, and incorporated a lot more land-based, place-based learning into the mix. So our educators in the place-based learning program, the visiting schools program, and the summer camps fit very nicely into the school for that period of time. There was just an ability to be adaptive and to move folks around within the ecosystem that really minimized our need to be disruptive to people's lives. And for those whose lives were disrupted, we did it in a kind of conscious way around, who could go on to family leave, or different kinds of programs that were available with the incentives around unemployment and such, that it was, we were very, very fortunate that we did not have to see a lot of human pain in that time period, and that most of our 200 plus colleagues were able to stay whole. And the board member who questioned me on why can't we simplify things came to me sometime during the COVID period, when we were able to maintain people's positions and apply for the different loans that were available, and said, "Oh, I get it now. I can see actually how complexity is what has really helped Hawthorne Valley to thrive in normal times, and certainly helped it to thrive and survive during an extraordinary period." So I don't know if I strayed far from the question there in that ramble, but
no, that's so beautiful. And I want to pause here just in case anyone else is feeling like this is just teed up the most incredible analogy for nature and the sort of disturbance ecology of social systems, where you manage to, without even a lot of perturbation. I think when we talk about a resilient ecosystem with a lot of complexity, any kind of major disturbance that rolls through is going to affect that system. It's going to feel a lot less severe, and the reaction time is going to be much quicker. And you see this incredible example of a social system that was set up with a lot of complexity, and people just figured it out much faster. I mean, whereas you have examples of things really falling apart before things kind of manage to piece themselves back together. And I don't think it should be lost on us that that these are forms that have existed for billions of years, and by replicating them, you've made something truly resilient. So whether or not you answered the question, that was a beautiful thing. I want to keep going though with this, because I feel like one of the things I'm trying to do with this season set of interviews is talk about the support systems for farming that is in service of nature. And this sounds very pie in the sky, I know, to some people or some mindsets, but I think that this is an example of one of those systems where the system, instead of being set up against, sort of small, intentional, holistic and ecological farming, it's part of a web of complexity that is a social system that supports a lot of other very important things. And so I would love it if you would just speak to some of the ways that that's evolved over time, how it even came to be this web. I mean, there's a school, a Waldorf school, anchoring this community. There's a farm that anchors this community. There's an arts center. There's all these other ways that the community sort of holds this up over time, and the relationships between those things. So I don't know, it's not really a question, but I think that if you could just talk about how over the years, this example has been patterning itself and sort of recreating itself probably several times over the years, and where you see it going. Because as you've said, I mean, there are going to be more things to react to. And I think that you're very forward thinking, and it sounds like you have a board of people working with you. So having not asked you an actual question, I think you're more than capable of just sort of riffing on.
More than capable of not giving you an actual answer?
Sounds great.
I could do that.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that I like to share with folks, especially if they're new to Hawthorne Valley, is just some of the foundational thinking that our founders had. I'm not a founder. I came in '84. Hawthorne Valley was already 12 years in at that point, but I did work with the founders side by side, and they kicked me into the deep end, and with probably insufficient amount of experience, but here I am. There's a little pamphlet that one of our founders penned. It was published posthumously, called "An Evident Need of Our Time," and it's a series of essays. And one of the essays was the Rudolf Steiner Farm School, and in that he laid down the vision for what is now Hawthorne Valley. And the idea was to found a place in the country on a working biodynamic farm that was where they could test the idea of educating more through the will and as a pathway towards cognitive development and developing compassion and empathy, and but that it was actually through the active engagement and work that we would find our way to these other ways of knowing, and that would be fully embodied knowing and understanding. And in that essay, he wrote, and I'll just paraphrase, what we are founding here is the seed of a living organism. That organism is essentially threefold: agricultural, educational, and artistic, as expressions of thought, feeling, and will. And each needs the other if the whole is to flourish. All are interconnected. This work together will create for young and old alike a place in which it's possible to become, in a true sense, a full human being. Now, that's not the exact words, but it's close, and there's a lot in that is so informative to me and has been in my 40 years of walking down the cow path to come into work. I think about this little verse all of the time, or this little thought construct, starting with, we're founding a seed. A seed is such a beautiful metaphor of possibility, and really nothing short of miraculous that within a seed, an oak tree can come about, or food to nourish people. As Elliot Coleman once said, however many tomatoes on a tomato plant out of one tiny little seed, like that's quite an ROI. Mm-hmm. Elliot said it much more eloquently than I am, but I think that founding it on a seed, and the seed of a living organism, again, takes us away from a mechanistic view of what an organization or a company or a corporation might be, more towards, I speak of Hawthorne Valley more as an organism than an organization. It's both, obviously, but it's very much a living organism, and it's very dynamic, and it's, again, very much a web of relationships. And that's how we have to look at everything, whether we're talking about the economy, whether we're talking about social forms, whether we're talking about nature and how we farm. We need to put it in the context of a web of interdependent relationships. And that it's threefold, as patterned on thought, feeling, and will, is thinking, feeling, willing, head, heart, hands. This is a picture of the human being. So you could say that looking at the health of Hawthorne Valley as an organism, one need look no further than ourselves and the integrity of our own constitution. And you don't say, oh, I'm the heart, I'm so important, I'm going to leave now, and you guys, good luck, I'm going to go off on my own. No, the heart wouldn't survive, nor would the rest of the organism. So each needs the other if the whole is ours. All are interconnected. And then on the how privileged am I front, to be able to walk to work every day where the goal is to make it possible for people to become, in a true sense, whole and full human beings, is a richness that I think everyone deserves, and that I feel really, really blessed that I'm showing up at a place where we have that as part of our work, and that we are supportive of each other in that pursuit. It's not perfect, nor will it ever be. It's human beings have a way of making complexity complicated, and while I like to make it strive for simplicity, even in complexity, we can go in other directions. We have ample opportunity to ask for forgiveness. We bump into each other all the time. There's a lot of karmic work happening, and that's always fraught with challenge. But I will say, on behalf of my colleagues, I travel a bit and I visit lots of places and other initiatives. And I don't know that I've ever experienced anything quite like Hawthorne Valley in that willingness to show up and come back and try again and roll up our sleeves. And this reminds me of a quote from another dear friend, David Orr, who said, "Hope is a verb with its shirt sleeves rolled up." And I think in order to have hope, one has to be willing to do the work. And I'm hopeful because I work with a group of dedicated, selfless colleagues who are doing just that. And the teachers in the school and the farmers and the researchers and the supportive staff in the offices. And yeah, I don't know that I've ever witnessed an assemblage quite like it. And they're like, for me, it's like the most amazing orchestra that you will ever see. And they're each one capable of being virtuoso in their own, on their own instrument, in their own field. And the place can hum along in beautiful harmony for periods of time. And it can also really get out there into very creative dissonance bordering on chaos at times. And that's where I have this, the thrill of having the baton for the time that I'm in this role as CEO, and trying to allow it to go into that creative dissonance and work with everyone to bring it back into harmony before we spin out into the indiscernible. And that's it's an amazing ensemble piece, Hawthorne Valley, and it couldn't be it without that. There's no I play a very small role in that. It's really based on the collective heart forces and intelligence and honest goodwill of all of the people working here that Hawthorne Valley is able to flourish.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
That narrative that you shared from one of the founders, that sort of densely packed, sort of like mitochondrial foundations of a cell, it's such an achievement. I can't think of a better way to categorize this. It's such an achievement, I think, to hold that membrane, that cellular membrane over time, letting it expand, as you say, and then contract down and expand and contract. And I think one of the most compelling and also bewildering parts of this that people will certainly ask, and so I have to ask you, is how does it survive in a capitalist economy. I mean, it sounds so, it sounds so outside of what we typically think of and what most of us are participating in. And this is hopeful for me. And so I really want to share how it is through some very careful and strategic economic machinations that I think are ongoing. But could you talk about the nonprofit side of it and the for-profit side of it, and how you are sort of structuring this so that, again, it can adapt, but can survive within a larger system that maybe isn't really set up to support something like this, at least from where most of us are sitting. It seems pretty magnificent.
Well, we're sitting in that same place, and how one can continue to do this. It's every year. It's been a question for 53 years, and there are as many extremely lean years or worse than there are years where we've, say, broken even or managed to generate a small amount of surplus to reinvest in some way. We are a not-for-profit, so we're a legal form as a 501c3. We are an educational institution. We were founded with the idea of bringing visiting school children to a working farm to have this experience of, immersive experience into stewarding the earth and how food is grown and what the night sky looks like, and things that we might all take for granted, but for young children growing up in urban centers, that we're often their first connecting point to that. And for the 40,000 plus children who have come through that visiting schools program in our summer camps over the years, they will say things like, "Oh, that was the watershed moment in my life. That was the time that changed everything for me. That was when I woke up to what was possible," or all kinds of kind of hyperbole and large language around that experience. And I know people from the very first class in 1972 all the way through till now, and many of whom become colleagues or come back as counselors, people who end up getting married on the farm. There's a deep connection that gets formed. And it's because it's attaching them to something like remembering themselves into the web of life that they didn't feel connected to in the setting that they were living in the urban or peri-urban environment. So, and that's not to say one is better or worse than the other, but this is just phenomenologically speaking what the experiences that they have coming here. So over time, the goal was that working farm would actually be a working farm and could prove the concept that there's viability for small and mid-sized independent farms in a country that was very much going in the way of industrial ag in the early 1970s when we founded. And there was the famous quote of, the ag secretary saying on national TV to farmers, "Get big or get out. There's no place for small farms. You have to clear from hedgerow to hedgerow." And what that might mean for biodiversity and the embracing complexity as a potential friend to soil and to the rest of the farm organism was not being considered by everybody at that time, and the idea of efficiency and profitability and everything like that maybe was taking center stage. So for biodynamic farmers like Hawthorne Valley, the idea of careful land stewardship and much more complexity and things being based on a scale that is appropriate to place was much more foundational to the thinking. And how to make that economically work was dependent on direct marketing. So the CSA movement is the example of that. And our neighbor Indian Line Farm over in Massachusetts was the first CSA in the US. And Hawthorne Valley was one of the early adapters of that model. And value adding on the farm and to direct market. So we, as a dairy herd, we started processing the milk in our own creamery and direct marketing through our own store and green market system, of which we're a founder in the founding farm in New York City, in the green markets down there, and then wholesaling some of our product, like our yogurt. And we're the first organic yogurt company in New York, and I think close second to Butterworks up in Vermont as far as national yogurt companies, organic yogurt companies. So we were early into a lot of this, and as early, there were a lot of people who were looking for this, and there weren't a lot of options. So we would go to the green market with the full truck and come home with an empty truck without ever having to really advertise, and seemed to have enough traffic around here to keep the store going pretty well, and it all seemed to work reasonably well. And the school then founded in '73 as a way of educating the workers of Hawthorne Valley Farm and Hawthorne Valley Visiting Schools program, and then also combined with the Camp Hill movements here. And there was one Camp Hill in the county already called Camp Hill Copake. There are now 4 Camp Hills, and if you don't know Camp Hill, your listeners should look it up. It's a wonderful movement that's also coming out of the work of Rudolf Steiner, that's dealing with people with so-called special needs who are living in a community setting with incredibly constructive, contributing, dignified lifestyles. And they are the villagers, and the people who are taking care of the villagers are about maybe, I don't know, less than 15 miles from here. So those families would send their children to Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School. And for when I came here in '84, it was the farm with the creamery, the bakery, and the store. The store was downstairs below me in this building, in a small 1,500 square foot, ergonomically disastrous layout. And then the visiting schools program. And over time, in 2003, when I became CEO, we formed Farmscape Ecology Program, which is now, 23 years old, and has grown quite a bit, and is a very respected research organism that is looking at the intersection of agriculture and ecology, and spreading its influence up and down the Hudson Valley in a very humble way. They're incredible, really, really incredible human beings who are really committed and walking the walk and trying to have this understanding and trying to answer farmers' questions and trying to encourage participatory citizen science and research, and successfully doing so. They just published their second book, and it's a ecological and cultural field guide to the habitats of Columbia County, New York, and it's absolutely a stunning piece of work, which you can look up online and find probably on our website or on Black Dome Press or wherever books are sold. And then we also started Alkion Center for Adult Ed that year, and that does Waldorf teacher training and artistic training and foundational studies in anthroposophy, which is the system of thought that is informing our work. And we helped with something called Free Columbia, which is now its own organization here in the county, and that's an arts organization. Over time, we've added the Center for Social Research was in one way or another already going, but that's going strong, and it was looking at ideas around economics and social forums, and we've published a few books on that, and now the center is primarily focused on technology and the role or the relationship of technology to human beings and vice versa, and we've published 2 books on that research and coming out with the second volume of the first book in the spring of 25. And we have an art gallery in Hudson, New York. We had a sauerkraut business that started in the basement of my office here, and we bought a building in Hudson and expanded that and took on some equity partners and spun it off, and that has now been purchased by another company, and so it's not part of Hawthorne Valley anymore. But we're wishing them great success because they're still buying regional produce and paying great prices to the farmers and paying living wages to the workers, and they're upholding what we started out, and they have a larger reach as far as marketing the product. So that hopefully will all continue to go well. You never know because it's not in our control anymore. Let's see, Farmscape, Waldorf School, teacher training. We have a small puppet theater, which I'm co-founder of with my wife. I'm probably missing things. There's a lot going on, and we've incubated any number of things. We started a grocery store in Hudson that was with some partners, but we were the primary drivers for the start and getting that launched until we were able to turn it over to the community in Hudson. And it's actually centered on the question of food access, and it has a tiered pricing system, so people can state their family income, and then with on an honor system, they are placed into a specific tier based on family income, and there are 3 different prices for each product, and depending on your family's income, you're either paying, the lowest price, which is basically close to cost, and then the next price up is cost plus a little, and then the next price up is like what you would pay in a normal grocery store as far as markup. It requires some philanthropic support, but it's now 6 or 7 years in and still running, and so we're hopeful that will continue, and we still do all the purchasing for it, so that they have our bulk discount buying, and that helps with the margins in the store there.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it's like partnerships like that, and any number of farms in the county have started from apprentices here and or former full-time colleagues. The Institute for Mindful Agriculture was 2 of my most beloved colleagues who founded that, and they're still working with that with a new fiscal sponsor. So if you look around, there's a lot of the Nature Institute was 2 of my colleagues who were teachers in the school who founded that, and that's now 25 years at least doing Goethean science and teaching courses all around the world, and really wonderful impulse. Very humble, but I think cultivating our capacity to observe as a basis for beginning to know and understand the world is a really good thing to do. And that's the work of the Nature Institute. So yeah, it's a lot going on, and it does change and shift, and it's, as I said earlier, it's not perfect, and we are learning. It's a work in progress is how I would describe it. And I think for as long as I'm alive, I will always call it a work in progress, because I don't think it's something that you could ever say, it's a checkbox thing where you say, okay.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
We've arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's far from it. And one of the real fun things of my position is I get to collaborate with other organizations and learn from them. And there are so many in the Hudson Valley that are doing really, really incredible work that inspire me and help inform Hawthorne Valley, and then also nationally and to some degree internationally, places that I get to visit that are aware of our work, and I'm certainly aware of theirs. And so I get invited to speak or go over and participate in some sort of leadership retreat or something, and then just do some pollination while I'm there, and I'm always able to come back inspired. And and to remind myself and my colleagues how people view Hawthorne Valley when they come here through their eyes and their lens, because we're so like deep in the weeds all the time, trying to just, and probably we're all seeing the things that still need to be worked on and that we're, that we still want to improve. And then other people will come and say, wow, there's actually, Martin, there's nothing else quite like Hawthorne Valley, which is gratifying and also terrifying, because it just puts a kind of responsibility. Wow, what do I do with that? And how do we live up to the full potential and promise of what we're working with here, as far as the 40 plus, 50 plus years and thousands of people's sweat equity that's gone into making this what it is thus far. And I will say one thing is, I think the idea of community supported agriculture needs to be broadened. And if we really value and want to see small farms continue, then it's up to all of us in the wider community to understand how we might participate in that value proposition and be co-producers, in addition to purchasing our vegetables at the beginning of the season, purchasing our share. I think there's a lot more skills in the wider community that farmers could benefit from. And I think that that we should never take for granted that small and mid-sized farms are going to survive, because it's I'm watching it, with holding my breath for all of my beloved friends who are choosing farming as a vocation.
Same. It's a real, I love that you said that and opened the door for that, because I think the farm being an anchor there, but also the way that the entire pattern is set up in everything supporting everything in different ways, and the redundancy in the ways that things get supported. This is just to kind of bring the metaphor out even farther. I mean, I often in my brain, it's all spatial, and I think of what you're doing. It's like carbon molecules, or it's like Tinker Toys or soil exchange sites. The more you have, the more you can have. And in the same amount of space, finite space, the surface area can continue to increase, making the whole thing more capable. And I think that, as you say, the way that we support, and I don't even like to put scales on things when it comes to land. I think it's about care and love and eyes and connection, and that from there, the spatial arrangement sort of figures itself out, but it's the connection that matters the most. So I have so many questions I'm not going to be able to ask you, but one of my deepest, most burning questions is about the orientation of the people that you are surrounded by and that you inspire, and that, become those satellites of inspiration out in the world. It's like a social contract, right? And there's a disposition of understanding, of sort of acceptance, and I wonder, you've been quick to point out several times that it's not perfect, and you bump into each other. And in my experience, and this is not to be pessimistic at all, but in my experience, the great, nothing is impossible, especially when it comes to the rebounding of biology. I mean, it's really just set up to do that. It comes down to people and the way that we are sometimes too smart for our own good. And so how critical do you think it is that who you are, the leadership, I mean, is it actually hierarchical? Is it a sort of community, almost hive mind? Is there a social contract, an actual social contract that people engage in when they're part of the association? Because it's incredible. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do a bunch of hero worship here, but I really do think it's incredible the amount of time and how much iteration has happened and how the integrity and the commitment remains. And to have that many people doing that through time, it can't be modeled, but what can you share? What can you share as the glue?
Yeah, well, and I have to just say, my grandson just walked in. I do have to take him to a
Yes, you're almost
orthodontist performance.
We'll wrap it up.
But that can get edited out. I had to say that our ecosystem is, looked at one way, and certainly if I'm applying for a grant for something and they want to see our like org chart, you can do the traditional you have a board, you have a ED CEO person, and you have everybody else. That's one model, and at times I have to exercise that final accountability piece, which are my least favorite times. and fortunately, honestly, in the 21 years that I've been in this role, I could count the times that I really need to do that in any kind of exerted way, and on one hand or less. That's a testament to my colleagues again.
Amazing.
And we are set up in such a way that each of the various functions or initiatives, we call them branches for the larger ones, but I say like departments or initiatives, each of the different activities, whether it's the farm, which is then also segregated out into the farm itself, the dairy herd, the market gardens, the green markets. We have the store, we have the school. Everyone has their own budget. Everyone has their own P&Ls. Everyone has their own management structure, and everyone needs to make it work at that level and has the autonomy to do so. And then we meet together collectively in a management meeting, which is every other week, focused on business, and then the other week we are either doing artistic work together or study, and that's the sense organ for how is the health of the organism doing, is that group to come together. And it's in a way a mirror group for the board, which is doing that same mirroring from outside looking in, and we're just doing it from the inside and reflecting back out to the board. So it's like a dialogic conversational process, and we mostly can keep the health of the organism regulated through that process. And sometimes it takes a little while, and there are things that affect everyone, like our health insurance rates and setting them and choosing providers. And so we'll prepare things and bring it out and do a whole process where everyone can weigh in and say what matters most or not to each, and then it's up to us and sometimes just up to me to say, well, given all that, I think we have to go this way. People will be able to confirm that in 21 years of doing this, I've never gone through that process and then just said, oh, we're going in the opposite direction of what I heard as being the kind of collective thinking and will of whatever group is constituted at that time. Why would I? I'm not that smart. And it's like to have that wisdom body and counsel to help work through all these things I don't think I'd want to be the head of such a complex organism with such responsibility that keeps me awake every night. If I had to do it on my own, like, forget it. I don't even claim to have the intelligence or skills to do that. It's more of what you said earlier about the skin of the membrane. I feel like my role has been more of cultivating the capacity within myself to just hold that space for emergence of what Hawthorne Valley, this being of Hawthorne Valley, is actually trying to express in the world. And we're all in some ways holding that space. And I will say I have a particular role in that because I'm freed up from the day-to-day being in the weeds, which I've also done my fair share of in my years here prior to taking on this role, and still occasionally do in various and sundry project management or teaching or whatever. But in this, if someone were to say to me, what do you actually do? I say, well, I'm holding the space because something really quite beautiful and miraculous is trying to come to expression through this being of Hawthorne Valley. And we each are playing our part in that. And for this 21 years, I've had this particular role, and it's been a marvel to witness what's able to come about when you sometimes just get out of the way and support that process. There's a great degree of uncertainty and not knowing, which has been my operating system my whole life, and it's served me well in this role.
And everyone, I think, in the entire organization must have at least an ounce of that disposition to for it all to work, because it's like surface. It's like surface tension. Each of those top water molecules have to be maintaining their integrity to keep it all together.
Well, there's a great diversity, and just to say, like, there is a huge diversity of opinion and huge diversity of disposition towards, like, some people would have much less comfort with uncertainty than I do, and we need all of that. That's part of the regulatory, it keeps the temperature and the well-being of Hawthorne Valley somewhere around, let's say, healthy or balanced, because you get to take that all into account, and you just don't go like swing the pendulum to one side or the other too far off center.
Yeah.
I think life is like, it should always be in movement, because if it's just still, then it's sort of implies death or flatlining. But you don't want that movement to be like so erratic that you are losing your balance and you're not even recognizing what the heck you're doing anymore. So that's that holding the space again, to keep track of that.
Well, Martin, I know you have places to be and important things to be doing, and I can't thank you enough for sharing this amount of time with me. I could spend another 3.5 hours just getting past the introduction. So hopefully we can have another conversation another time. But thank you so much for what you do and for what it means in the world to have these places that exist and can inspire and not be replicated ever, but be an example of the most beautiful destinationless journey I hope to see it in person someday. But even if I don't, it's so good in my imagination, and I'm so appreciative of you and your team and the community that you've built together. And I wish you all the very best. I'm just so inspired, and I really needed that. So thank you so much. And we will share all the ways that people can find you, including your amazing podcast. So thank you again. Just really appreciate that you came on today.
It has been my pleasure. And I look forward to our next conversation already, as much as I enjoyed our previous one and this one. And so, yeah. And I've gotten the better end of the deal in all of this, I can assure you. It's been a real privilege to just do anything at Hawthorne Valley. So,
well, we are all grateful for you being there and for the community being there. And best to you and the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you, Martin. Bye-bye. Let's all go to Hawthorne Valley. I'm sure that you all loved Martin as much as I do. And happily, Hawthorne Valley gives tours, and you can go and experience all of the wonderful products that they produce there, get to see a little bit of what the school does and some of the art exhibits. And I hope all of you, I know I will seek out a way to get there someday. And since we started with such a wise quote, I think we're going to end with another one of my favorite Jack Handey quotes. Before you criticize someone, walk a mile in their shoes. That way, you'll be a mile from them and you'll have their shoes. See you next time.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Always make sure to check the links in the show notes for how to follow our guests and hosts. The No-Till Market Garden podcast is a free show that is supported by folks like you who contribute every month over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. That support helps ensure all the shows we do, from the Seed Farmer podcast to the Winter Growers podcast, the Collaborative Farming podcast, the Composter podcast, Growers Daily, and of course, the No-Till Market Garden podcast, can continue to go and grow. You can also find books and hats as well as an active forum over at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge thank you to editor Michael Sellis and producer Jackson Roulette for all their work on this show and the rest of the team over at no-tillgrowers.com. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and make sure you are subscribed wherever you're hearing this so you don't miss the next episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. See you then.